openings where I'm like half talking and people catch part of the sentence and stuff. But anyway.
I just realised that's the first time I've actually seen myself playing it. It's not pretty.
I know. I did some photographs of someone. I've done a couple of headshots of folks playing the flute, and it's kind of like both of them were women in it, and there's that whole, it's like, this is not a good angle. This is just, you got to find the right angle. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Friday We're Friends. This gentleman over here is Carl Gough, and he is a friend of mine, and he's all the way over in South Wales. And I have a map here. And what I like about this particular part of South Wales is that the Romans used to call it Silveras or Silverae. And I think that's really kind of cool. But Carl lives in this region right here. He can't really point to it. But this is the Roman map. It's funny that the Romans called Port Talbot Port Talbot.
No, I'm not quite sold on that.
It's always been Port Talbot, hasn't it? Now, he said in the worst Welsh accent ever.
Michael Sheen, that's his hometown.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
See, there's Port Talbot, still there. It hasn't moved at all. Ah dear. So welcome everybody. We've got Lisa here. Hi Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
Greetings from New York. No, North Carolina. Sorry. Pete Abdullah. He's down in Florida. Yes, we are warming up. Scott Moore. Scott's a good friend of mine. Another one. Friday We're Friends fix. Yay! I like that. Tony Cranston. He's on your side. Greetings from Yoga Chai Tea and more London and yes. I'm not actually drinking my chai tea right now. I had a late night last night. I was watching Megan Wells do her show with Antonio Hosha and Shelley. Can't think of her last name. It was absolutely brilliant. But then there's a chit chat at the end, like question and answer, and I didn't get to bed until like midnight. And then I got up early because I wanted to get. Yeah, it was pretty music. Thank you, Lisa.
Or mediocre.
Carl is
So we were going for.
Yes, before we started, Carl said, I hope you're not expecting good. And I said, no, I'm expecting mediocre. Because I am a cheeky monkey. Who else have we got here? Jane! I love Jane. She's excellent too. And my good friend Andy Davis. He's up in Conway in New Hampshire. Mo Reynolds. She's freaking awesome. Meg Gilman. I love Meg. Wow. Meg, you got to come on one of my shows. You've got to be on one of my Friday with Friends. We've got to figure this out. Even if you sit in my garage on my laptop and I do it up here. Another good friend of mine, True Ricker. So lots of hugs to True. He's brilliant. Hello all the way from the other side of town. It's true. He's just on the other side of town. So I just so that, I like to introduce people as how I met them. And Carl and I, we had a strange... We met on the interweb. First time I saw Carl, he was in a video, and I loved it so much. I said, Carl, I want to know more about you. He got onto our lists.
That was on LinkedIn. It was LinkedIn that we made the connection.
But what is that where it was? I thought it was through the Nest, or what used to, what is Nest now? What used to be Lanes.
You saw the video, but the message I got, because I posted the video on LinkedIn, which was unusual for me.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I ruined your flow.
No, it's all right. I am like the ocean. I can hit a rock and bounce off it. But anyway, I saw this video of Carl, and it was a single take of a story that he filmed outdoors, and I was gobsmacked. And I was like, "This is so good. How long have you been doing this for?" Because the comments that he had is like, "Oh, I'm kind of like not sure if I should put this up there." And I was like, "What the heck are you talking about? This is freaking awesome." And he said, "Oh, I've only been doing storytelling for a year," and I was like, "What the whack are you talking about?" In one take, and I was so impressed. And we've kept in touch over the years. And in fact, when I went over for my dad's birthday one year, who also lives in South Wales, which is where Carl is, Carl and I went to visit Kath Little and her story circle in Cardiff. And it was kind of funny because Carl said, it's all the way in Cardiff. And I was like, well, how far away is that? It's like, well, it's ever so far. It's about 40 minutes away. I'm like, dear Lord. I drive to the grocery store and it's 40 minutes away. Let's get in the car and go, you silly son. So we did, and it was, I don't know, it was just another step of our relationship, and it's brilliant. And then I had you on the Nest Fest this last summer, whatever it was. And that was awesome. You did so well. I mean, I wasn't expecting anything less.
It's funny, like you say with that first video that I was like, not really sure I should be putting that up. Even all these years later, every time I post a recorded story, I still have that voice in the back of my head, because at the end of the day, it's different, isn't it? I mean, there's no getting away from it. What we do now through these virtual means is different, and we do miss the live audiences, but I think you can get away with the digital content a lot more now than you used to be able to do.
I know. I mean, how long ago was that when you put that up there? That's got to be 10 years.
2012, that was.
So pretty close, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So 9 years ago.
Of course,
so you were an innovator.
Oh, but it's really quite fun though over these past 12 months, because for understandable reasons, I've met storytellers like, no, you shouldn't be doing that, and it should be this, and really phobic when it came to sharing anything digital. And of course the whole playing field totally shifted on that. And
so what were you saying about that?
But it's nice to see that being embraced. I mean, we were talking before you put this on there, didn't you, that whilst we have lost a lot on a temporary basis, we've gained so much as well. And the geography side of things, I love the fact that geography doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
Time zones.
Getting over to
for geography, not so much.
Yeah. I mean, getting over to, not getting over, but like seeing Liz Weir and her storytelling circle, and those types of things, and the storytellers from India have suddenly popped up and have become somewhat prevalent now, which is brilliant. I need to see more of that stuff because it's amazing.
I'm getting to the point now though that I'm feeling bad because there's so much out there that I want to see, and I'm not getting around to seeing it.
Yeah.
There's life now binging.
Right. I mean, things are starting to get back to get back to the new normal, right? I'm starting to get, even though the pandemic has not ended, and the death rates are going up. I hate to say, everywhere. I think I'm getting requests to perform either virtually and in person later in the year, and so it's kind of like getting the contracts out, doing all the business side of things, and it's kind of like, well, I was going to go and watch that, but I really need to get these contracts out because I need to make some money.
That's definitely the hardest part with the digital, though, isn't it? Is the earning a living from it.
Yeah. Well, I was telling Carl before we got on. I've got this gig up in Hanover at the Rec Park and Recs department, and it's on the top of a multi-story car park. It's on the top level of a parking lot, right? And it's going to be socially distanced. Chairs are going to be out. It's an evening, like 5:00. It's dusk, but it was. What's the temperature now? Because it's warmer now than it would be. Hang on, where is it? So it's right now. It is 1 degree Fahrenheit, which means it's Well below freezing. Well below freezing.
I'm going to have to convert that to Celsius now.
Okay, well, hang on. I'll do it right now. 1 degree Fahrenheit in Celsius. Oh, well, that didn't hear me properly. It took all that other stuff. We'll probably get messages in a minute saying you're too slow. It's minus 17. Minus 17. Yes.
Ow.
But the sun is out and the sky is blue. That's what I like, you know. It's yeah.
Ow.
A bit chilly. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, where we used to live, Carl, we used to live in the floodplains, like further up north in New Hampshire, right? And it's kind of close to the river.
Right.
And so our driveway was 250 feet long, and it was just open on either side. So when we went to get the mail from the mailbox at the end of our driveway, right, we would have to put on thermal underwear, snow pants, jackets and sweaters like this just to get the mail, because it was, you know, like minus 17 degrees Celsius. And, you know, when that wind came in, it was like, so cold. You know, you might start walking out in your jeans and you'd immediately turn around and come back in and like, put out snow pants and gloves and face mask and helmet. Yeah.
Didn't I see you on one of these saying that at some point you had a what would be the word? A desire to be a postman for a time, or am I totally dreaming that?
I think I did say that, yes.
You somewhere saying that you fancy being a postman doing the door-to-door thing.
Yeah, be a British postman. I think they do it in the inner cities in the States, but over in the UK, it's like most, yeah, but not here. Oh, no, not here. This will be over in the UK where, you know, it doesn't often get below 0. Oh, so Nadine, my cousin Nadine, who says hi, she says it's 10 degrees here in Connecticut, and yes, the sun is out, but she means 10 degrees Fahrenheit, which means it's not quite freezing. Yeah, I mean it's still 20 below freezing Fahrenheit. But anyway, so what are you up to these days? What are you doing?
Oh, I'm in transition.
Okay, that can mean so many things these days.
I should probably explain, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
I think the last sort of year has been painful, but as we've already been talking about, we've gained certain things as well. For me, something happened sort of early summer, middle of the year. And suddenly something began to shift for me. I've had a ridiculous number of jobs, various careers, some of which you're aware of. And I just suddenly woke up to myself one day and thought, wow, I've got all these different heads, and a lot of these lives are way in my past, and I've left them there. Wouldn't it be great if I could actually connect those lives before I got caught up in this whole storytelling thing and began to pull them into this world? And for the most part, what I'm talking about there is a lot of the environmental stuff. I mean,
you have a zoological background, don't you?
I left school at 15. which is scarily young, but I left school at 15. I finished my exams, but I was the way my birthday falls, I was always one of the youngest in the school year. Right. So I left school at 15. I was put onto a training course in fish husbandry.
That's such a great name, isn't it?
I need to backtrack here. As a kid, we've moved so many places as well, but when I was about 9-10, we moved to Cornwall. There I fell in love with the sea, with the ocean, just the magic of rock pooling. Used with my parents' kittens, because I'd be down in the rock pools, I'd be gone and it was dark, and I'd come back, they thought I'd been swept out to sea, but I didn't really care because that was my world. That was the gateway for me, Cornwall. Then,
so was it a sigh of relief when you got home?
It was generally a whack. I wasn't a bad kid, but I did make them worry, and I was made very clear that I had made them worry. But then I started keeping fish, and then one spring in the pond, the fish started spawning. I pulled out some of the eggs, stuck them in a little plastic container. Lo and behold, they hatched, and I was hooked. From that point on, I was absolutely hooked. How this little tiny dot of a creature could grow into, well, those goldfish. Anyway, that grew, that expanded. I got involved in aquatics, and this is all while I'm still at school. I got a part-time job in an aquarium store, selling tropical fish. Self-taught all the way through. And I wanted to go on and do marine biology, but and there's probably a key lesson to be learned here, because at that time my teachers, all right there, Joseph, my teachers were not altogether convinced I had it in me. My parents weren't totally sold on the idea of me pursuing academia either. So that's kind of why I left school at 15 and was shunted into YTS at the time, Youth Training Scheme. And I was set to work on a trout farm. It's not the same as tropical fish.
No, it's not.
It's hard work. And more than that, you know, my love of aquatics and life beneath the surface was always driven by one of fascination, of appreciation. And suddenly here was I banging fish on the back of the head with a club and sending them off to market. You know, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
I didn't
so you were breeding fish for slaughter then?
Mm-hmm. It was a trout farm, it was, yeah.
See, trout farms here, they usually release them into wild ponds where people can go and fish them.
They do that too. They had a fishery with big lakes, and it was a very exclusive one as well. You had to pay a lot of money to be a member to fish in these lakes, but you can't run a fish farm on that alone. You know, you're either supplying other fisheries or you're supplying fish for consumption.
For market.
It didn't sit well. So
I bet,
I eventually, I think I was there about 3-4 months. It was a lovely place. I used to go walking through the woods in the evenings, tracking deer. It opened up the whole British countryside to me because it was in a lovely location near Petworth in Sussex. But anyway, through long story short, I got back involved with tropical fish on that training scheme, and then fate took a turn and I ended up being a dolphin trainer. So I did that for a few years, and then I finally returned to education, and then I did finally get my marine biology. And I've totally lost track of how I ended up getting sucked into revealing that part of my youth. Where did we start?
I can't remember. It doesn't matter. Leave the past alone. Let's keep going. Yeah, it's brilliant. And so when you here's Meg Gilman. She's said something a whole lot fascinating, Carl. I used to fill my sister's red wagon with frogs' eggs. I'm not sure if that's a good... and watch them turn into tadpoles. I wasn't sure if that was going to be some sort of prank or something then. When the tadpoles sprouted legs, I took them back to the pond. My career in aquatic life ended there, though I did fish the ocean for bluefish, where we had club nicknamed the priest because it administers... Wow, this is an interesting conversation that we're having here, isn't it? What? Does anybody else have any death clubbing stories? Oh my gosh. Do you remember that Greenpeace sticker before it was out for a very short time? I'm not going to talk about it because it's kind of dark. But they had anyway, moving right along.
I remembered why I started. I was on about pulling my past into my present with the storyteller.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of work at the moment looking at re-engaging with what mattered to me about environmental issues and really going through a radical overhaul of who I am as a storyteller now. There's always been an environmental feel, but it's become something else now. It's a journey.
Right. Well, I think life is, isn't it? And it does. It takes us on these twists and turns. I'm a big believer, not necessarily in fate, but to some degree fate, right? It's like you went and did all that marine biology stuff, and you learnt all about these animals. You realise that clubbing trouts to death was not a good thing, and now your life has come right around. Sorry,
that so tickled me, Meg.
And now all of that experience that you had in the marine world, you can now bring to conservation, and you can share that story through storytelling and through the folk and fairy tales, which is bloody amazing. Because I think a lot of these old folk and fairy tales, the Selkie stories, right? Don't kill seals, right?
There's something much deeper for me though in those, because and this is what I've really started to overthink.
Sorry, Carl. Hi, Mum.
Yeah, them pesky fish.
Yes. We talk about Wellington boots and tadpoles, but I don't think we should.
Oh. No.
Oh, you didn't. So this was
You can't.
So I went to a fairly rough school growing up, and there were some kids. I was not one of them because I was a lover of nature and all that. But there were some kids at my school that used to go around collecting tadpoles and put them in their wellies, and they would have a bet that you can't, and they would bet kids to put their feet in these wellies with these tadpoles, and then run around in a circle, which is like awful because you'd squash probably 90% of these things. It's back in the 70s, mate. It was a rough time. We had gangs with axes and motorcycle chains in those days, running from one estate to the next and all that kind of stuff. I wasn't on any of those estates. We were off to one side, which was kind of nice because
frogs have been on the short end of the stick with a lot of childhood capers, I believe.
They are, yeah, of all sorts. And at high school, when they start like pulling them apart and sticking electrodes in them and stuff. Poor frogs.
Yeah, I mean, they don't do them in the schools like that anymore, though, do they? Not over here. Do they with you?
Oh, it's America. There's money to be made in selling frogs to high school, so of course it's still going on.
I do remember the dissection of a bullseye in my biology at school, and
oh my gosh.
One of my friends.
We're talking about a bullseye from a bull, as opposed to like from the center of a dartboard, right?
Yeah. A physical eye. And he was two seats down, and all of a sudden he just stood up. Where are you going, Hayden? And he said nothing. He's white as a sheet, and he just started walking. And then with every step, he began to wobble more and more.
Oh no!
Then eventually, fortunately, the teacher was right by him. He just collapsed, and she caught him. It was just where he didn't take too well to our dissection classes.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm not sure how I never did biology, so I did physics, but not biology, so we didn't cut anything up.
I'm wondering whether you need to put up your message of it's okay, safe to listen again.
Maybe I should have done. I didn't even think of that. Megan likes your journey though, and I tend to agree with her. Yeah, they will. They'll absolutely be so meaningful now because he brings all of that experience to the story and that that backdrop of nature and how important it is. To pick up on what you were saying about the Selkie stories. The more I've had a number of stories that have reasserted themselves, I guess. You know how it is. There are some. You grow into them.
There's some stories that you try to tell and they don't stick and they disappear. And I've had a couple like that who recently have gone, right, now you're ready to tell me. Because there's that missing component that I was never properly recognizing before. The whole thing with the Selkie tales, you look at them and there is also that sense of what it would be like to be able to transform the other way. That door is open. Yes, it's she loses her skin and she's forced to live in the living world, a human world. But whenever I hear those stories, it's as much from when I listen to them, it's as much about a longing to be able to do that transformation the other way, to be able to experience it. I mean, there's a lovely, similar, very similar to the Celtic tales. Peter Stevenson has a lovely book of stories of Wales, and in there he's got a story about the Swan Lady of Gower, and it's an equally painful story like the Celtic stories, but a swan in this instance, and it's that same thing, that transformation. I don't think I'm unusual in that regard. I think a lot of people would, imagine what it would be like to live through different eyes,
Oh yeah, I think that's an interesting point, because we all, when we learn our stories, we each individual storyteller, no matter whether it's a performance storyteller or like the storytellers down at the pub, in Liz's thing, and they are what I call real storytelling. We all come with a certain lens on our face. There are our experiences growing up. There are your experiences growing up. We're not too different in age, but I think there's definitely a sociological difference in what we grew up with. And then there's a geographical difference as well. I grew up in Worcester, you're in Sussex, so there's that whole like southern thing and not quite northern. But it's like these stories, they challenge us to look at life differently. And actually, one of the storytellers on last night's show on Moonlit Stories, Megan Wells and Janice Del Negro's show, Shelley, I can't think of her last name, it's driving me bonkers, but she told a Selkie story. She took the story of the Woman of the Sea, right? She kind of like made it the next generation, and it was the grandmother was the one who had lost her skin and never been able to return back to the sea. She had voluntarily come onto the shore to marry this guy. She wanted that, and it's all about her granddaughter meeting a Selkie and wanting to be of the sea instead of the land. Mm-hmm. And her created folktale, her newly created folktale that she made up herself, is fascinating, because she takes this young woman who doesn't want to be of the land but wants to be of the sea, and her grandmother's the only one that can tell her that she is already of the sea, and so she like dives in, and it's just it was an amazing story last night. It was so good. I mean, I love those stories anyway. And for anybody that's watching, I don't think there are too many people watching that won't know what the Selkies are, but the Selkies are the seal people, the seals who can turn themselves into human form, and when they are in their human form, they are the most beautiful creatures on this planet. And of course, they're musicians and poets as well.
I have to tell you something that happened. It was almost exactly a year ago. Sherry Lovett, it was it?
Yes.
Right.
Thank you, Megan.
I was looking for a breath of fresh air, and so I went with a friend down to Gower, which, for the many of you who won't know Wales. Oh yes, I've got
the map. Hang on.
The map. That peninsula coming out there from Swansea, from Abertawe. If you go right to Worm's Head, there we go. Worm's Head is this peninsular rock that sticks out. It gets cut off at high tide, but you can walk out there at low tide. You've got to race the tide though to get back.
Yes, you do.
Apparently,
it's a pretty fast tide, isn't it?
It's the second highest tidal range in the world. Apparently, Dylan Thomas got stuck out there one night as well.
He did?
Yeah, had to spend a night out there waiting for the tide to go back out again.
That's pretty cool.
Seals out there, because it's nice and isolated. You get grey seals out there. So I was going with my friend, and we were rock pooling, and we were wandering. I said to her, "I've never been right out to the actual end of Worm's Head." We didn't make it to the end of Worm's Head, but we went part of the way. And as we got sort of over where it starts to get green and grassy again, we realised there were some pups on the rocks down below, still in their white fur. But then, as we were looking, we also realised there's the bizarrest thing. There was this girl down by the water's edge, and this is totally true. She was down by the water's edge, and she was crouched down with her hand out, and there was a seal, a wild seal, in the water, sitting as seals often do, with sort of just their head there. And it was like looking at her, and then it was coming closer and closer still, and it was just you don't expect that of wild seals. No. I mean, I've worked with them back in the day when I was working in public aquarium, what have you. But wild seals, they're really nervous creatures, you know.
They're skittish, yeah.
And it was just, where you're talking about the Selkie stories, it was just, I stood there for a moment and I just thought, I wonder.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Yeah. Could you show me your fingers, please?
It was there for ages. I mean, she was still there when we walked off. It was just magical. Yeah.
Maybe the seal was saying, "Not yet, not yet. Wait, there are people there."
Yes, someone's looking.
Yes. Wow. That, yeah, I do. Yes. That's those moments are just remarkably. They're moments to treasure, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I lived in the New Forest. Not for about a year, and that's such a magical place as well. You know, I lived up in Essex, on the Essex-London border. So we had what's the name of that forest? Epping Forest, and it was a very sad forest. I mean, you got the M25 that basically wraps around it, you know, so it's like all that pollution from the, you know, and it's a dying forest. And when I lived in the New Forest, there's nothing anywhere near it, and it's one of the most vibrant, alive forests that there is. And I'd gone out one day, and I'm walking through this meadow, right? It's surrounded by trees, and there was this fog that was down on the land, and there was this stream. Now, there's a lot of streams that go through the New Forest and through these like big meadows that they have. And they're usually, you know, 2 or 3 feet down before you get to the water, right? They've just worn their way through. And they're pretty narrow. I mean, I think the widest one is probably like 3 or 4 feet. And you got this it'll rain the day before, and the water was raised right up to the level of the grass. So it was like this silver ribbon that went through it, reflecting all of the mist and the fog. And I could hear what I thought was at first thunder. And I stop. And I wait, and it's like it's not. It's hooves galloping. Now the New Forest is known for its New Forest ponies. So I'm expecting this herd of wild ponies to come bolting out, but I see this stag come out of this mist and leapt over the stream, and then this herd of about 50 deer, you know, as they're jumping over, and it was just like, I'm expecting King Arthur and Merlin to stride out behind them, or a wild boar, you know, and it was just like, oh my, you know, it's like, that is in my soul, you know, that moment is engraved in my soul. I can imagine it still to this day. It's just phenomenal. And for you to see this woman who may or may not be a Selkie on the side of the shore, you know, Worm's Head. I mean, it's just those are like magical moments that we hold on to, I think. Yeah. And that's, you know, for me, that's, you know, I think a lot of the storytellers in Britain and Europe, you know, we have all these places, like you were telling me before we started about the boar, what is it? You go on. Take over.
The chase of the story of Kilhuch and Olwyn.
Yeah.
Is that what you're? Yeah. So where I live is right next door to a place called Cwmtorch, which is Welsh for Valley of the Boar, and it's a lot of the stories in Wales are very strongly rooted in the landscape, and that story comes indeed from the Mabinogion. So the story of Kilhuch and Olwyn, it's a curious tale, a love story, although you do kind of lose track. You lose track of it for a fair bit.
Yes.
it's a love story that becomes an absolute gore fest as King Arthur is called upon by his nephew Killuch to help him win the hand in marriage of Olwyn, and they've got these impossible tasks to do, and I won't break it all down. The book's there if you need to go for it. It's a long story, but eventually it leads to this chase of this magical giant boar across southwest Wales, from the very end, Pembrokeshire, St David's area, all the way through the hills and mountains. And amongst the other four that are accompanying the Toch Troedd, the giant boar, the first one of them is slain by Arthur's men in a wooded valley at the foot of the Black Mountain. And from that day on, that location became known as Toch Troedd, which is about half a mile up the road. So, yeah, the thing with Wales...
Which for the English means you've got to get in a car. Oh, no, it's the Americans that would get in a car and drive that, but...
Yeah, but you see, when you live somewhere like Wales, you don't want to drive. There's too many fabulous walks.
Oh, my... Yeah, and South Wales. I mean, God, blimey.
Or North Wales as well, mind.
Well, North Wales, yeah. I haven't been to North Wales in a long time. I want to get up there because I've been seeing photos of North Wales and some of the driving through the valleys with those long roads that just cut through. Oh, my gosh.
It's exactly what you're saying about that story in the New Forest. North Wales, for me, that my heart belongs there, because when I first moved to Wales, I moved to North Wales. I didn't know why. I'd been obsessed with coming to Wales for so long. I've moved a ridiculous number of times, stupid amount of times. I worked it out a while back. I'm 50 this year, and I've lived in 34 different places, which gives you a feel for how many times I do.
That's a lot of moving. Good grief.
But ever since I was young, I always had this pull to come to Wales, and then eventually I did. When I went back to education and I got my A-levels to get my entry into university, and my first choice of university was Bangor in North Wales, and I didn't know why. I had never been there. I just knew that's where I needed to be. And it's so hard to put into words, because that connection is... Oh, absolutely, yeah. With fire as well. When I got to North Wales, it just took a hold, and for the first time ever, I knew what it was like. Llandudno. Yes, the goats went on the rampage during the first lockdown. When the people disappeared, all the mountain goats came down and started walking through the streets.
Oh, they did? That's so cool.
There's footage out there of them in people's front gardens eating their bushes and what have you.
I guess we have deer doing that, so yeah. Anyway, sorry, go on.
No, that's the thing with North Wales, is the wildness is still there. Yeah. And the Welsh have a word called hiraeth, which doesn't have a specific English translation, but it's akin to that sense of longing you get when you might liken it to homesickness in a way, but it's that sense of you belong to a place, and when you're not there, you ache to be back in that place, and very much that. I
have that with South Wales. I really do. I mean, it's when I was growing up, there was this house that went on up on the market for sale, and I think I was like 15 at the time, and I just jonesed for this house. It didn't have electricity. It didn't have. It had Tilly lamps, had the little gas lamps in it, and that was it. And they said you need a Land Rover or something similar to get out to it, and I'm like, I want that house so badly. And now I'm over in the States doing what I'm doing, so I don't know.
But you live near to woods there, don't you?
Oh, I do. Yes, there are. Yeah. So I mean, I look down. I'll show you. So we're in the middle of town right here, right, and
Nope. He's cut us off. Where are you, Simon?
Sorry, mate. I just kicked myself out of my own studio, which is pretty funny. So I now know that there's a shortcut key on my keyboard that can take me out of the studio. Who knew? So this is my view, right? And if I were to turn the camera the opposite direction, you see a wall, but that wall would be, if you went through that wall, you'd end up on the high street in New London. But this down, whoops, sorry, that was a bit quick. This down there is woods, right? There's nothing there. And if you go over, sorry, my zoom work is a bit appalling. But if you were to keep going down, I've kicked Carl out now. There we go. If you were to keep going in that direction, there's plenty of woods down there, and it's just one of my, and I take Mo for a walk going the other way, back up towards the high street, and you drive across the high street and go down like half a mile, and there's this like massive forest there, whole bunch of trails through there. You can do a 20-minute walk in and out if you want, or as I discovered one time, you can go in there for about 4 hours and not know where the heck you are. That was when Mo and I went in the woods. I was on my own with Mo at home, and we decided on Thanksgiving Day that we would go for a little hike and explore. And I forgot to bring my phone, so I couldn't look up where I was, and I got completely turned around in the woods. And we went for 4 hours hike, and basically I headed for this highest peak so I could figure out where the lake was, and then I just descended straight through the trees, through people's back gardens, because of people that live there, and onto the road, and then it was a 2-mile walk back to the car from where we were. It was very exciting.
I've got a question for you, and this is very much what I'm trying to sort of get to the roots of right now. In that moment, how exposed do you feel, or do you not feel exposed?
Well, you know that there are bears out there?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a bit of a concern there, but I've also got a dog with me, so I'm not too concerned. There are people that hunt out there, and I happened to be all in green that day. So that was, and you can hear people shooting sometimes, and that's always exciting. Oh great, they're shooting when they're not supposed to today. Fabulous. But no, I never really felt exposed. For me it was just, we're on an adventure,
Okay.
But I'm the tarot card, the Fool, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of, I hate to say it, but it's part of my psyche, which, for good or for ill. When my wife Sarah and I, she lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I went with a friend of hers to check out this used car. It was a truck, actually. So we're driving around in this truck, and it ran out of gas, and we left it on this street, and we walked, 2 miles back to the dealership, and the dealership were like, oh, we thought you'd stolen the car. And I was like, no, it ran out of gas. And like, where is it? And we told them where it was, and I'm like, really sorry, it ran out of gas. And they're like, oh my God, their faces went white. And I'm like, why? It's like, well, you're both still alive. That's a really bad neighborhood. And the fact that you came out alive is pretty, it's like, so you're going to go and get the truck? It's like, nah, it's not worth it. We'll leave it there. And I did the same thing when I went to visit my cousin when she lived in Cincinnati. I was just wandering around, this is really cool neighborhood, and hey, how you doing? And people are like looking at me like, who is this guy? And I tell my cousin like where I've been, and she's like, you should never have gone there. And it's like, I don't know, angels, I guess, I don't know. But yeah, it's like, I don't really, and if I sense something's wrong, then I start heading back to where I hope I can find a road and escape.
Well, my question was driven by this. I like the experience of feeling prone, vulnerable in wild places. Just stripping away all the stuff of modern day living, because this is where I'm coming from in trying to reconnect with a deeper sense of the world in which we live, and mixing that up with stories, because we are insulated. through our existence, and that's part of what I think is the issue that fundamentally needs to be addressed. I mean, one of the things that it's such a simple thing to do, but going out into the woods and then actually, I mean, I know you've got a big issue of Lyme's disease out there, haven't you? So maybe
we do.
Maybe this isn't one for out with you, but going out and actually just taking those shoes and socks off, and just actually having a proper physical connection with where you are. And it doesn't take long for that to really begin to shift perceptions.
Yeah, no, I'm a big believer in that. When I lived in the New Forest, I used to do that a lot. I haven't done it so much here, but yes, our old house up in Orford with the 4 acres, where in the valley bottom, I used to do that all the time. And we walk around in our garden. I ground myself. I mean, at this time of year, it's a little chilly to do that, but end up with frostbite.
Then you feel vulnerable.
Yes. So I mean, I wouldn't say that I feel vulnerable, but I definitely feel more connected. And there is this energy that I feel sometimes. I'm not sure if it's vulnerability though. I think because I think when you go out for me, when I go out in nature, I feel more connected to life than anything else. And maybe there's an underlying vulnerability there. But it's like this connection that I have to the outdoor. I mean, if I'm having a really crappy day, and nothing's going right, I'll go into the woods with Mo, and I'll come back and I'm just like totally in tune.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a reset, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. Does anybody else feel like that? Who's out there? I don't know if my mum says I was always fearless. I don't think I was fearless, Mum. I think I was completely oblivious.
Megan was asking, I think she was asking about how you spell Hiraeth.
Yes.
I'd need to write it down to be certain, but it's H-I-R.
Why don't you there's a private chat over to the right. Why don't you put it in there and then I can cut and paste it? Yes, I quite often get lost, Lisa.
There we go.
And Scott Moore says, do you think the Fae are watching out for you? I feel there's, I think that there's something about that.
In Wales in particular, there is an energy. I think that's why I love it so much in Wales, because there's something that's very easily reached just beneath the surface.
Mm-hmm.
When I lived in North Wales, I used to go out a lot, just on my own with a sleeping bag and my dog, spend the night out, watch the sun go down, watch the sun come up, and it was just gave you perspective. That every night I would do like that. In the morning, you just felt different. There was one particular place I used to go to near Llyn-Gwynant, which is at the foot of Mount Snowdon, and the magic over those waters as the sun would come up in the morning, because you begin to feel the way that the mountain winds change and shift. And as the heat from the sun begins to come with the rising sun, there's a moment, I liken it to it's very romanticized, I know, but
go for
it. There comes a point where it almost feels like the earth has taken a breath.
Yeah. Yes.
You get mountain winds, and there's a balancing point where the warmth of the sun has begun to shift the winds, but you've kind of got this.
Yeah.
And then the winds come back, and that.
And I felt that at dusk as well. Mm-hmm. Not as often as I have at sunrise, like at that morning time. But yeah, I've noticed that for sure, and I've noticed it a couple of times at dusk. But I have to be in the right. I think there's a couple of things. I have to be in the right frame of mind, and I have to be in the right place. I think
that's what spending the whole night out used to do for me, because you go there and first setting up, it's all it's like, oh god, where's the back and where's this and where's that and where's the kettle, and then you settle, and then there's nothing. There is nothing. There are times though that you get scared, and that's what I love. There was one night in the darkness, suddenly all these rocks moved up on the bank, up in the trees. My dog sat bolt upright and started growling into the dark, and I was like, okay. But that adrenaline rush, I mean, I liken it, it's getting lost, absolutely. It's putting you back in touch with a state, a way of thinking that was very with our ancestors. You spend a night out in the woods by you don't know if a bear's going to come through.
Well, right, yeah. I mean, that is one of the things that I've considered it about spending a night out with just a sleeping bag, and we used to camp out in Oregon, and in Oregon, if it's public land, you can camp on it, right? If it so you can go and like there's the wilderness is just nuts out there, and we have been camping out. And we've had bears come through the camp, and we've got all the food is like way up in the trees and on branches, so the bears can't get it. But it's like you hear them, and it's like, and you kind of wait, and if they get close to the tent, if you can hear them getting close to the tent, that's when you start banging the pots. And we I've also been in cougar country. And I felt something. I don't know if it was a cougar or a bear, but it's like there are these signs that they have up, like cougar have been spotted in this area. Be very aware of your surroundings, and this is what you do if you see one, right? Number one.
Right now, I can imagine.
Poop your pants. Okay, got that one. Check. It's like don't look directly in its eyes. Like why not? I want to outstare it, and it'll run away. It's like oh. So, and then, you're thinking like, am I going to remember all that if one suddenly appears on a path? And then you hear, then we're on this one trail once, and we heard about this, we saw a video actually of these guys, they're walking along, and there's the trail is raised up above them, right? It's like 10 feet, this ledge, right? And then there's the path 10 feet down, and there's this cougar that's watching them. And they're like, wow. That's kind of intense, and they're filming it, right? And they keep walking along this trail, and I'm like, dudes, don't you want to back away? But they kept on going, and they said, one of them said, do you think it's following us? And they turned around, and sure enough, it was still there up on the ledge behind them watching. And it's like, you got to do something about that, or it's going to eat one of you. Now, there's talk of cougar sightings. They used to be around here. But not so much anymore. But yeah, I do sometimes think about spending a night out in these woods, like with just a sleeping bag. But I also think I don't really want a black bear coming over and saying, "Hey, what are you having for breakfast?" Because I'm about to have you. Especially in April when they first come out.
Yeah, it's easier to be brave camping out in Wales than where you are.
Yes, yeah, you don't have wolves or coyotes, Like, the biggest fear, I think, in Wales is like a bunny rabbit or a goat, right?
Oh, the ticks, though. Sheep ticks. Oh, yeah. I love every creature on this planet, but sheep ticks I struggle with. Everything has a function. Everything has a place. But yeah, ticks is something else.
Yeah, I don't see any parasite being a bonus on this planet.
Oh,
come on, biology guy, put me in my place. I dare you. Tell me that parasites have a place on this planet.
Well, I mean, there's different grades of parasites, isn't there? I mean, mosquitoes. So. Would you term a mosquito a parasite?
Yeah. So I do accept mosquitoes because they feed bats, and I love bats.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you something else that's really... I spent some time working in, of all things, immunology. So the current situation is quite interesting.
Yes, it is.
One of the trains of thought, right, around intestinal worms. Okay.
This is an interesting topic to suddenly go to.
Do you want to put your safe message up again?
Yes. So if anybody wants to tune, so I have this thing on my banners that if anybody wants to tune out right now while we talk about worms and stomachs and stuff, we have this. So if you want to like turn your volume off or take your headphones off, as soon as we've stopped discussing this disgusting subject, I'll pop this back on and you can join us back again. Okay.
But it's fascinating, right? Most parasites, fundamentally, parasites do not want to kill their host, right?
Right. I get that.
So intestinal worms, they secrete certain chemicals that suppress the immune system, because otherwise the immune tissue within the gut-associated lymphoid tissue, still in there, otherwise you get a really inflamed intestine, inflamed bowel. So the intestinal worms suppress that. And what scientists now believe is that, there's a rising incidence of allergies in people.
Yeah.
With every generation, we seem to be getting more and more allergic to stuff. Mm-hmm. And what they're starting to wonder is if it's to do with things like intestinal worms. Because we are now so clean of parasites, we're not exposed to the immunosuppressants that we've biologically evolved to be in existence with. Almost, it's not, it's still a parasitic relationship. But that's what they're wondering, is whether by removing parasites, specifically the intestinal parasites, that we've actually got an immune system now that is hypersensitized because it's not suppressed by parasites. But there we go. So
that's an interesting thought. Does anybody want to comment on that? I wonder.
But you see, this is why biology fascinates me. That more things in heaven and earth, there really are.
But yeah, it is. That I do photography. That's what I went to school and studied, and that's what I did for a long time. But over the last number of years, I've really started to look at flowers in a very different way. And when I've got a macro lens on, for my camera now, which I got a couple of years ago, and you can get in really close. And when you enlarge those, you're looking at a flower that's this big, and you make it this big, and the detail that you see in the patterns, some of the stamens, they look like coral reefs, these like big coral reefs. That it's fascinating stuff. It really is.
Do you want your head blown now about flowers and bees?
Actually, who's working on flowers and bees? I can't think. I can't think who it is. Oh, it's Laura Sims. If she were here, she would be so let's do it. Yes.
I only recently became aware of this, but what they've realized is that plants, in particular flowers, because they're rooted into the earth, they gain a slight negative charge. Okay? Mm-hmm. So along comes a little bee flying through the air, and because it's flying along in the air, it builds up a slight positive charge. So that little bee comes flying along looking for a nice little sup of nectar, lands in a flower to sup the nectar, gets covered in pollen. Mm-hmm. As it does so, because you've got a plus charge meeting the negative charge, it cancels it out, and then the bee flies off. Now, what they've realized is bees can actually sense the charge in flowers, and so they can tell which flowers have just been drunk from, because the negative charge has been neutralized by a recent visit from a bee. So they won't visit a flower that's already been drunk from, because they can detect the electrical charge. They're not wasting time going to flowers that have nothing to offer.
That's fascinating. So last year I was out, and there are all these bees flying around. I can't think of what they were called now. Oh my gosh, asters. They were flying around all over these asters, right? And I was like, all right, there's this beautiful aster there, gorgeous, perfect. Some of them are like not as perfect as this one. And I got my camera set up on a tripod, waiting for a bee to go there. And they're going to every other bloomin' Astor than this one. And I'm like, why aren't they going? This looks great. Come on, eat. So obviously that one had been drunk from already. I should have got up earlier in the morning.
As the flower begins to replenish the nectar, it builds up its negative charge again, and then the bees know it's ready to drink from again. It's just...
Wow. Isn't nature amazing? So now we've talked a lot about biology and sleeping out in the woods and stuff. Someone did talk about, mention, I think it was Joseph, dragons. Because someone here likes dragons. And there's another one over there on my ceiling. Wales is the land of dragons.
Isn't it just?
That the history of Wales was foretold by Merlin because of 2 dragons that were pulled out of the ground from a pool that was beneath a castle or a tower that was supposed to be built, but it kept tumbling down, and Merlin said, there is water beneath that. And no, there's not. Have a look.
Yes.
And you'll find 2 eggs. So what's your... Have you ever seen any dragons?
Well, yes.
There's a big one that walks around sometimes, blowing smoke out and stuff. Am I right?
The very mound that you're referring to, Dinas Emrys, the story that the 2 dragons comes from, is in North Wales. And linking back to what we were saying about going out spending... I've spent a night on top of Dinas Emrys. And it was the most curious night. You could hear stuff moving all around you, and you'd shine a torch, and so it's a very mystical place. But then it was actually around, it was the summer solstice I went there for. So I spent the night up there over the solstice, and then as it began to get light, the clouds were all sort of dancing around the tops of the mountains as they do. And then there's a particular meteorological... Yes, there's a fair few mountains in Wales where they say you'll come back insane or a poet. I think I got the former, not the latter. But
I was going to ask.
But that particular morning, I'm not sure meteorologically how it happens. It must have something to do with different air temperatures, pressures. But have you ever seen that effect where clouds start pouring down a mountainside?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so that started to happen. I was sat looking up the valley, sun coming up. The sun started, it was a beautiful sunrise, coloured sunrise. There were reds, there were pinks in amongst the clouds. And then as these clouds began to cascade down from the mountains, from them appeared, I kid you not, a dragon. Not living, breathing, but in the shape of the clouds. Its claw was out like this, just like on the Welsh flag, and its head and the body was more serpentine. And honestly, I kid you not, the red from the sunrise lit it up. It had a yellow belly, red down its back, a sort of purpley coloured head. As it moved with its claw out like that, and it slid down the mountainside, along the bottom of the valley, and then climbed up the other side.
Oh my gosh.
It was, I thought, I need a camera, and I'm so glad I didn't have a camera.
Yeah.
Because, it's one of those things in my mind, it lives there always now. If it had been a photo, it would probably have never captured it in the same way that we were seeing it.
Right. It's the same with me and the deer. I mean, I take a camera with me everywhere, and I had a camera with me, but it happened so quickly I wasn't able to get the camera out, and I'm so grateful that I didn't, because that whole magic would have been taken away I would have been taken out at the moment by getting my camera out of the bag and recording it. And I think that's, when we go to these concerts or performances or whatever, and you see all these people filming, it's like, dear Lord, experience it now, I mean, I get taken like short snippets, because you want to have it captured on film or whatever for later date, but like, you see these people and they just got the thing up the whole time.
Can you imagine a storytelling performance where the audience are doing
No, I don't want to imagine that. No, that's not allowed. That would be illegal. I absolutely not. Lisa says she wants to go to Wales now, and I thought, yes, Wales is it is absolutely beautiful there. I mean, when I went over to it's my dad's birthday today. So, Dad, if you're watching, or probably not, because happy birthday, Dad. He's 20 something again for the umpteenth time. You know, when I go over in January for his birthday, which I've done a couple of times now, you can go out onto Gower and up all that south coast, and there's like gorse there, and it's green and it's beautiful. You know, it's not like here now when it's like, you know, bleak and cold and bit bleh. It has its own beauty, but yeah, it's oh my gosh, it's amazing. Yeah, Jane also agrees with me about it. So if people get cameras out, I usually stop performing. You know, and I say it's $1 a shot, and they usually put them away at that particular point, just because I'm a cheeky monkey. Yeah, Wales is amazing. I've been to North Wales as well. We did a school trip a few years in a row, and any of my school chums that might be watching this, they might remember it. We would go up to Snowdonia and we would hike Snowdon, and you know, and one year we had snow like this that we've got outside now, and that was phenomenal. Because, you know, imagine sledding down on your own jacket head first down Mount Snowdon, steering with your feet.
I know.
Like I said, the fool.
Like I say, yes. for those who are thinking about coming to Wales, I mean, there's I feel like I should be representing Visit Wales now, tourism board, but. You know, we've got the highest concentration of castles any place in the world. Yeah. You know, there are so many, which hints a lot of sort of the confrontational history of Wales.
Between Wales and England? I don't know what you're talking about.
Where? Wales and where, did you say? But the other thing, and I would love to do this, I just don't know if I'll ever find the time or energy, but they've actually created now an uninterrupted coastal path. So you can, should you choose, walk the entire coastline of Wales. Phenomenal. I mean, there's stunning places that path will take you through.
Oh, didn't somebody recently do that? To raise money for... Oh, Jeremy, where are you? What was it? Somebody just did the coastal. I think maybe they did the whole country, actually. It was like for diabetes or something like that. It was a fundraiser.
I think there's a lot of virtual walks available now, because I've seen a few going, and the Wales Coastal Path is one of those where you walk wherever you are, and it adds up the miles that you've walked. And
yeah, who'd want to do that? I'd rather be out there for real.
The real path.
How long would it take to walk that?
I have no idea.
A week?
Have no idea. I did toy at one point of just walking south to North Wales, just for the hell of it. And I think there's a regular walk from the highest mountain in South Wales to the highest mountain in North Wales. That's the regular one. Mm-hmm. I don't know how long it takes. I think some people can do it in a week, but I think that's asking a lot. I don't know if anyone...
That's a 15-mile day type of thing.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone who's listening in knows it, but no, it's the coastline of Wales is so varied, because you've got the Severn Estuary in the south, you've got the Pembrokeshire National Park, so it's a marine national park. Just
stony beaches, no sand.
Yeah. One day.
Maybe we should do that. Maybe we should do a storytelling walk. Like, do the walk and stop in these villages and do storytelling at nights at every pub that we stop at, or every, you know.
That would be a challenge, wouldn't it? I know Beyond the Border at one point, where
that'd be fun.
For a festival they were going to use boats to do a trip around the coastline of Wales, stopping in at various ports and harbours along the way to tell stories. But obviously the logistics of organising something like that is rather big. Yes.
Yeah. So Lisa says, is there really no sand?
Oh, we do
there is sand. There is.
Cockles.
But cockles.
Lava bread.
Yes. It's lava beaches. Just lava beaches. Yes. No, like the whole of Britain's pretty rocky. I mean, there are some places where like Bournemouth has these like gorgeous beaches, sand beaches, but you go a little bit further to the east and you get to Brighton. it's all stone, all stone. Yeah. So there are some beaches that have sand, and there's a lot of beaches that have rocks. And Becca Worthington, she says she's late to this conversation, but I wanted to pop this up because it's a huge thing. I'm fascinated with dragonology. When I was in my late 20s, I traveled to Warsaw, Poland, specifically because my travel guidebook said it had an actual fire-breathing dragon. Spoiler alert, turned out to be a tiny statue with a Bic lighter that went off every few minutes. That is brilliant. So no, Wales know how to do dragons because didn't they made a robotic dragon, and didn't it go around the streets? Wasn't that like
I didn't see it. Was they installed it at Caerphilly Castle.
Right.
But it was stunning. But
was it 30 feet high or something like that?
Oh no, I think no. What I'm thinking of is something else.
Yeah, the one in Caerphilly is different, I think.
Yeah, the one
because that's kind of like a Disneytron type of.
Yeah. I don't even know if it does that.
Oh really? It just stays and just breathes out smoke. No, this one was a mechanical dragon, like robotic dragon and it was about 30 feet high because I saw pictures of it going through some of the streets of Wales, and it was like at the same height as some houses. It was amazing. Oh, and so Megan has asked, I think twice now, where can people hear your stories? Are there any on your website?
Yeah, I've got a page on my website which says there's in the menu it says listen to a story, and in fact I only recently, because of COVID, pulled it all together and on a single page on my website. So I've got a lot of recorded stuff there, going right back to the story that Simon was referring to, which was
back in the day.
And that was an invented story as well. That one came right off the back with just a single quote about Celtic traditions with the fir tree.
Right, and you do that a lot, don't you? Because you did one about Easter or oyster.
Astara, yes.
Astara, yeah.
Every now and again, I don't plan it, but every now and again, something will grab hold of me, and I think, ooh, and that the part that gave birth to the Great Forest and the fir tree. I can't even remember what book I was reading. Shameful. But it made reference to the fact that the Celts believed that the fir tree held all the spirits of the forest within its branches during winter, because it was, and actually, no, that's all it said. And then from that, it was so evocative. And I thought, oh, this needs something.
Yeah.
So I sat with it for a bit, and I thought, right, and then I thought, okay, well, clearly the thinking there, it's evergreen, the branches are big and bushy, so protect. And from there, that story evolved, of a forest that ruled the world at one point, which more or less it did at one point. So yes.
Yeah, it did. Well, they say that sometimes some places it did, but there are people that wonder if it was all forested, or if there were actually natural meadows, because at some point the trees are going to come down and there's going to be nothing there, right? I mean, that's just the natural way of things.
Well, this is I'm going to go off on one in a minute. I had to reel myself back in. Because
I want to talk about going about the spirits in the trees. So you mentioned that, and what Dr. Martin Shaw, he talks about the lindworm, and how when the daughter of the what is he, a baker or whatever, fishmonger, I can't remember, like the girl that's going to marry the worm, right? She goes out into the woods to find the answer to the question. And the way that Martin Shaw tells it is that when she was sitting in this particular place, the spirit came out of the tree. It didn't come from behind the tree. It didn't come around the tree. It came out of the tree. And I think that probably is not in most stories. It's like she appeared, right? And I think that what he's done, he's taken what you've, tapped into, back into the story where it might have been taken out of the story before by the collectors.
There's a lot to be said about trees. I mean, you've got Taliesin. So Taliesin, a very prominent character within Welsh myth, legend, poetry, and you've got the Battle of the Trees, where the trees came to life fighting a war. There's dryads is the other term. Tolkien within Lord of the Rings, the Ents. All of that is rooted, pun intended, back to this. I don't even want to call it a way of thinking. And I'm beyond caring anymore. It just is. I'm one of those. I'm one of those people.
I'm with you. I am too.
Sit with a tree, and it's actually something I'm hoping to start. I've got an idea for a project that comes off the back of this, which hopefully, when we're allowed to mix again, I'll be able to start piloting. But there is a lot to be said. Actually,
Sarah Maitland wrote a really good book.
In Hand.
Yes, Braiding Sweetgrass.
She talked a lot about it as well in there. It's. I'm coming from a scientific background, and I'm familiar with the whole argument about anthropomorphization. Putting human feelings onto non-human things, but this comes back to what I was saying before. This loss of connection, and the more we can connect, and if that involves layering our own feelings in order to understand and better recognize the life that shares the ecosystem of which we are a part. I mean, I've been having discussions with some other people, and it's come up again and again. In Braiding Sweetgrass, she mentions it as well. This whole idea between ecocentric and egocentric. And it's the whole thing of the food pyramid where man is always put at the top. And actually what we need is a more rounded view, idea of things.
So Sarah Maitland also wrote a very interesting book. And I can't remember the proper title of it, but I think it is, I'm putting in the chat right now, The Secrets of the Forest. And it's Sarah without an H, Sarah Maitland. And her book is also a very good read. Maybe it's called The Whispers of the Forest. It's something like that. But it's because what she did, she went to all of the major forests. She spent 1 month in a forest in Britain, right? So she went to the New Forests and was there for a month. She went to Epping and she was there for a month, and she wound in folk and fairy tales. Even though they were like a lot of them were Grimm, because that's a large part of the folktale canon comes from Grimm in Europe, and so she visited a lot of these forests throughout Britain and Wales and Scotland, and she wrote about these particular forests and how each one was very individual. It's the same way that I said that Epping Forest is kind of dying off, right? And then you've got the Forest of Dean, right, where people used to mine, right? And there are still people that do mine, and they don't make much money, if any money at all, but it's trying to keep the tradition alive of the type of mining that was held in this particular forest. And it's the way that trees, and in Japan, switching subject, change direction a little bit. In Japan, there are these that they now have these forests set aside for people to walk through to relieve stress, because whatever you do in the forest relieves, and we were talking about that earlier, right? It's it's not magic, it's science we haven't figured out yet.
Well, there's another train of thought with it as well, and one of the reasons trees are very much portals into our own subconscious as well as other things. I love that, Gossip from the Forest. Oh, was that the name of the book?
Yes, that is Gossip from the Forest.
Right. It's this whole idea that trees, they are a single living entity that actually crosses multiple realms.
Right, they do.
While, they are rooted in the earth, where the Celtic otherworld was supposedly meant to exist, Anu.
Right.
Then you've got the central trunk exists in our world, and then you've got the branches and the canopy which exists above. Right. And so you've got this whole idea of the tree transcending all these different realms. And so I think, I imagine Joseph would have a lot to say on the subject if he's still here, but
I don't know if he is.
But yeah, the relevance of trees to folktales, myths, and to the here and now as well. Mm-hmm. I say, go out, hug a tree, and don't care about the people staring. Kristen, you need to go hug trees as well as people.
Yes, I think she might do. I think she does. Yeah, when I was working in the New Forest, my boss Dave, who I miss incredibly, and I lost touch with him, and it really irks me that I don't know where he is anymore. But Dave, he was absolutely brilliant. At the time, there was this commercial that came out, an advert on TV, and it's like all these people like, I am a this, I am a that, and there's this one guy that's standing in this field of corn. He says, I am a tree. And the first time I saw that advert, I ran down to his room, and I was like banging on the door, Dave, 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 and he's like, yeah, we just saw it. It's like, you are a tree. It's like, we thought of you, Simon. Because I was a big tree hugger, still am to some degree, but I used to literally hug trees back in those days. Very much in touch with all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it is safer to hug a tree right now than a human being. So but they're not quite as malleable as a human being. They're a little tougher. And Joseph is still here saying, yes, trees. But I think that's all. Is that all you're going to say about trees, David? Come on. Joseph, sorry. I don't know why I called you David the other day, not to your face, but to somebody else. And some Native American cultures, this is Megan Gilman, say that the land that you belong to is in you, perhaps understood by the chemicals in the dirt, the earth and the flora. Right, because a lot of people that have allergies to pollen, if they eat, and my brother-in-law does this, he eats a teaspoon of locally made honey, grown honey, I don't know, created honey, locally stolen from the bees honey, a teaspoon a day or so, through the winter when the pollen comes back in the spring, he doesn't get anywhere near as bad allergies as he does when he doesn't do that. Because it has all the pollen in the honey, and your body builds, the antibodies that you're talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So there's the world of nature is just fascinating to me.
Funny little anecdote to go with that one about bees and the pollen they collect in their honey. There was a beekeeper who began to discover his honey was turning the most peculiar colours. He was getting hives with blue, with purple and green, and he couldn't figure out what it was. And then eventually, what it turned out to be was his hives were close to a factory where they made Skittles. So the bees were going off to the factory, sucking up the coloured sugar, and bringing it back to the hive to make their honey. So it was taking on the colour of Skittles. Ooh. Taste the rainbow.
Yes, that's funny. So I wonder, you must have read that book about the molecules of water, and how if you were to write love on a jar of water and hate on a jar of water, the molecules taken from the same source, and you look at those molecules later, they're very, very different. Have you read that book?
I haven't read it, but I'm familiar with the memory of water. Yeah.
Yes. So I wonder, if you were to look at the molecules of that honey that's taken from the sugar from a Skittles factory, and look at the molecules of honey taken from wildflower bees, I wonder what that would look like. Ooh.
I imagine they taste very different.
I imagine they do. Taste and look and the molecules as well. Joseph doesn't want to add any more. He says it's my show. But the whole thing about this show is that we like people to join in. Come on, Joseph.
I've never really had time to spend that much time talking to Joseph. But...
Well, it's all the way in Cardiff. I mean, it's miles away.
He's a busy man.
I know he is. He is a busy man.
Yeah, we were very lucky when the university managed to snatch him up.
Yeah. Yeah, another reason to go to Wales.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, Joseph Sobel, Dylan Thomas, castles. It's all good things. Yeah, it's like first time I took Aiden over, and when it was just him and myself, it was, he said, I want to see some castles. I was like, all right. And we saw so many castles on that trip. He almost got castled out, but not quite, because it's literally, well, the one castle that we went to on our last trip, because we didn't have time to go that far. There's a tiny little castle ruin. It's basically 2 walls, just outside of Hereford. And he was just happy as a clam, and the moat was still there. And there was a pond that was a lot smaller than it originally would have been, where they would have harvested fish for, grown and harvested fish. And it was kind of fascinating because I had all these boards up, the 2 walls. They have more boards and more descriptions about, the life at this place than there was castle itself. But it was brilliant. I gotta say, I do like Wales. It's one of my favourite places on the planet that I've been to.
One thing, I sent you in private message the spelling for Ricilli. I wanted to leap to the defence of sandy beaches.
Yes, I'll put that in the chat right now. I'm just going to capitalise it.
Ricilli Beach routinely wins the award of in the top 10 of UK's beaches. It's a beautiful expanse of sand.
And don't they also have a big, what's the word I'm looking? Oh my gosh, come on. Don't they have a big sandcastle competition there as well?
There is one. I'm not sure if that's where it is. Yeah.
Do you want to share a story? And you can say no because it's late and we've been chit-chatting for almost an hour and a half.
Oh.
And
yes,
it's not quite throwing you under the bus, but almost. Because I think people would love to hear you tell a story.
Short and brief.
So that funny word is the word that means homesick but not really, and Ricilli Beach is where there's beautiful sand. And do people surf there as well?
They do. Caswell Bay tends to be more popular with surfers. Right. Yeah.
You got bigger waves there. Yeah. So do you want to tell a story, or do you just want to say no, Simon? We'll do that next time.
I could share.
Hang on. Joseph. Okay, I'm thinking about tone wood guitars. Oh yes, guitars are typically made of rosewoods, which are very dark. They literally have darker tones than guitars made out of lighter woods, mahogany, koa, maple. One can hear the prismatics of the woods and their visual spectra in tones that come out of the instruments. Yes, I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. Yeah. So Joseph, I got a question for you. Do you think that, on the spirits of the wood, do you think that if there are spirits in the wood, if they come out into musical instruments when they're made? Because they used to, reading, I don't know if you've ever read these books by Lucy M. Boston, the Green No stories, Knowe. And I think I haven't read these books in a long time, but the Chimneys of the Green No, they talk about the building of this old house, and it talks about the masons and how they talk about the grain in the stone and how they're attuned to the spirit and the vibration of the stone. And we could translate the spirit to the energy of the stone, because everything has its own vibration, everything has its own energy. That's scientifically proven now. And maybe this is something that we need to come back to is in our art and craft, is that stone has this vibration, this energy, this spirit, and if you know what that energy, that spirit is, then we can form it better. I mean, you look at some of these buildings that were made in these times when it was just a blooming chisel and a hammer, and the art that was created. It's just, and woodcraft as well. It's just phenomenal, some of this stuff. And David said, absolutely. Joseph said, why do I keep calling him David? It's driving me bonkers. Joseph said, absolutely, in terms of the spirits and stuff. Yeah. Anyway, story.
Let me share with you because I'm aware of time. Let me share with you then a truncated version of the Swan Lady of Gower that I mentioned, which has lots of echoes of the Celtic tales. And for this, I want you to take everything that you've learned about Wales in this moment and imagine yourself sat by the edge of a cool, clear lake in the early morning sun, just as the earth breathes and as the earth exhales, carried upon those gentle, cool morning breezes. You see the elegant, outstretched neck, broad wings of a swan. As she descends down upon the water, her great webbed feet out breaking, as she skims the water and comes down into the water, achieving the transformation from Queen of the Sky to Majesty of the Water. And as you watch, she begins to swim around the lake, inspecting, looking. And then when she is certain that she is safe, she makes her way into the reeds at the edge of the lake, and there stretches her neck upwards. And as she does so, the feathers part and fall like a discarded cloak onto the bed of reeds, and out steps a beautiful, long-haired, white-skinned lady. Her skin as pure and as white as the very feathers that she has just discarded. And then she enters the water, allows the cool of that isolated lake to cleanse her before she then climbs out, lays upon the dewy grass to allow the first rays of the morning sun to dry her, before then stepping back into the reeds, putting back on her cloak of feathers, heading out into the open waters where she picks up speed, opens her wings, skips across the still calm surface of the lake, and rises once more into the sky to ever fly ahead of the sun. She did this every morning, and every morning was the same, until, like you, sat at the edge of the lake, there was a duck hunter. A duck hunter sat disguised amongst the bushes one morning, intending to catch ducks, and instead he saw this scene unfold before him, and he convinced himself he was in love. But the love that filled his heart was not the love that gives, was not the love that lifts you up. No. His love was one of possession, of ownership. And he was determined he would have her as his wife. Every morning he would wait and watch until the morning he found his opportunity. As she swam off into the waters, leaving behind her cloak of feathers, he sprinted from his hiding place, grabbed hold of her cloak of feathers. Seeing him, she swam back. She stared him clear in the eye. "Give it back." "No." "Give it back," she said in denial. "No." And as she reached out to take it back for herself, he snatched her wrist, twisted her arm. And now she realized, without her cloak, her limbs were weak. She could not fight him off. He took her cloak, and she was forced to follow back to his cabin. He locked her cloak up in a chest beneath his bed, and no matter how often she pleaded, he would not give it back. Instead, night after night, she was forced to watch him as he would take her cloak from the chest, caress his face with her feathers. It made her sick, filled with revulsion, and yet there was nothing she could do. So she waited as the years rolled by. The muscles in her arms began to waste away from not having been used to fly the air. And then it happened, one night as he had laid back on the bed, caressing himself with her feathers, he fell asleep. She didn't waste a moment. Snatching her cloak from between his arms, she ran out into the night. Struggling to put on the cloak as she ran, she could hear him behind her. She heard a shotgun. He shouted, "Stop!" and she would not, could not. She ran, tears streaming from her eyes, desperate to rise up once more. And as she pulled on that cloak of feathers, reached out her wings, she flew up into the night sky, illuminated by the moon. The pain in her arms was immense. Her arms were not used to flying anymore, but still she flew, heading towards the moon, always towards the moon, but always ahead of the sun.
Oh my gosh. Carl, that was brilliant. And that's the truncated version.
Yeah.
It's a nice uplifting story to leave us with.
But there is a lot within that about how we treat nature.
Yeah.
The world around us.
And how we treat women, or, how women have been treated in the past.
Right.
For sure. Yeah. Wow. And there are ties, I think, between the Valkyries and the Swan Maidens. I mean, aren't they one and the same?
Yes, of course, yeah.
Yeah. And, when you were telling that story, I was thinking of Wayland Smith. Another brutal story, but another beautiful story as well. Mm-hmm. Where Herva, the wife of Wayland Smith, Herva inspires him in his escape by creating a set of wings for himself to flee the island on which he's trapped by Nidud. And that's such a good story, Carl. Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks for letting me share.
No, you're welcome. That was worth the wait. That was worth the price of admission, wasn't it? Oh, we got new comments. Good, because I was hoping that somebody would say something about that, because it was just, yeah. That was wonderful, incredible. Yeah, she got away. I know. I was worried about that too. I was like, no, she can't die, because I have a slightly dark mind. Some people know this, but yeah, it's like I'm thinking, God, cut his throat at night. It's like kill him. Yeah, but like I said, I have a bit of a dark side when it comes to stuff like that. Yeah, Leanne, thank you so much for commenting. I really appreciate that. We got some, yes, that was very much a wow story. Thank you very much indeed for sharing it.
I'm honoured to be able to share it.
And Megan stepped into the terror of what it feels like for women. That's a compliment if ever I heard one. Saw one, read one. Yeah, right? And it's, it's something that people go through, women go through every day when they step outside the house. It's like, it's, we just don't, as guys, as males, we don't have that fear, we are, again, it's another part of that whole, oh, Kristen, you miss, darn it, it's all right. You'll get to see it again on replay. I hope you heard that story just now, because that was just phenomenal. Tom Davis, yay! The Davises are here. They do Stone Soup. in Woodruff, South Carolina, which is a fun little festival.
I need to catch up with the stuff that's going on stateside, which I've started to now, thanks to virtual and digital means.
I know. And all these stateside people who are watching you, they're probably like, "Ooh, how can we get him come and join us?"
Oh,
that's right. She was dancing. Yes, that's all right. Dancing is good. Yes, I would agree with that. There was a lot of silliness going on, but there was also some really interesting conversation in this episode, for which I thank you heartily, Carl. It's always a pleasure to be in your presence and to chit chat.
I'm a big fan of the silly, though.
Yeah, I am too. So we should tell them about the most recent silly we had. I kind of butt dialed Carl as I was driving somewhere. I was taking my phone out of my pocket and throwing it on the passenger seat, and I suddenly hear my car going ring ring, and I'm like, what's going on? So I throw the phone up on the dashboard, and it was WhatsApp or something as well, wasn't it? I don't know how it happened. It was a FaceTime. It was a face call, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So I sort of took it off the thing and I put it on the passenger seat, and so Carl's looking at my seat roof, and I'm just like driving, and we're having this nice conversation. Yeah, it was like, wow, the universe provides. So it was fun. It was nice to have a little quick catch up, because we don't normally do this, although I think we should do it more often, offline, as well as online. So everybody, thanks for sticking it out for like an hour and 41 minutes. You guys are brilliant. Absolutely excellent. And Jane wants to know, is there a longer version on your website?
No, this one lady is one that's not on my website.
All right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask you a question. Carl, would you like to perform that whole story, not now, but at some point in the future, for people that tune into this?
I say there's not. I didn't cut out much. I mean, I would say you've got enough of a flavour of that story. There isn't probably much more that the longer version would add to it.
Listeners, do you think he's messing with us? Do you think he's just pulling a fast one on us? Viewers, watchers, people out there. I'm not sure. That's cool. So it's nice that there's Welsh in your family. All right. Always up for the silly stuff. Yes, and the stereo. Yeah, this is... Oh, don't be sad. It's all right, Kristen. You'll be okay. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We should probably get off. I'm going to whiz through these comments because I want Carl to see them. Yes, we will. I'll have Carl back on again, and we'll do more storytelling. In fact, maybe we'll swap stories. We'll just muck around swapping stories because yes, we can have a Carl part 2. You are a popular young man, I tell you.
Thank you all so much. I tell you, this is good medicine. This is, because it's been, particularly the last 2 months have been really hard, and it's just, I mean, I have to say, and I'm sure everyone listening is going to agree as well, this man here, Simon Brooks, you are an exceptional human being. The warmth and generosity you put out into the world is breathtaking, and I just wish there were more people like you in the world, and I am very grateful for the invitation to be on Friday with Friends.
Well, I consider you a good friend, Carl. I know we don't see each other very often at all, and we don't talk very often, but there's a heart. I think there's definitely a heart connection between us. So yeah, we'll definitely have you back, and we'll have to, we do try and keep in touch, but I know both of our lives are somewhat busy, and you got stuff going on at your place, and I got stuff going on at mine,
and different time zones.
And different times. That doesn't make it easy, does it? It doesn't make it easy. But thanks for being on the show. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And as Joseph, so I want to explain why I keep calling Joseph David, is because there is a nature writer called David Sobel, and I know some of his work, and I worked with a guy who talked about him all the time, and that's where the David is coming from. But Joseph Sobel, our very own Joseph Sobel, is going to be next week's guest. And I'm hoping he's going to share a story and maybe play a tune on one of it. He's multi-talented, sickening people that drive me bonkers, because it's like, I can barely play a penny whistle. And he just sits down and says, oh, what shall I play today? It's brilliant. I love that. So Joseph, we'll see you next week. I'm excited about that. Same back channel, same back place, but a different time. I can't remember the time. Let me have a quick look in case people are making look on the East Coast. It will be at, hang on, I'm getting there. Noon East Coast time is when we've got it. I got it on my calendar for, and I'm really excited about having Joseph here, as I was really excited about having Carl here. Thanks again, Carl. Thanks everyone for being here. Take care of yourselves. Find those good stories. Walk in the woods. Watch out for selkies. They're still there. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.